So, this part of the slideshow, we'll talk about what we plan to be doing on Saturday, November 11th. This is the sixth day of our trip. We've been, well, perhaps we should just look back at how we got to the sixth day. We flew into Israel and will be staying at the Renaissance Tel Aviv Hotel. That's one of the Marriott chain, and it's a fairly modern hotel in the modern city of Tel Aviv. After arriving in Tel Aviv, we will travel to Nazareth, scene of Jesus being raised. We traveled around to Caesarea, Mount Carmel, Tel Megiddo, the site of the legendary Armageddon battle, which might take place at the end of all time. There's a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee. We'll travel to the village of Magdala, where Mary the Magdalene comes from, to Capernaum, Bethsaida, Safed, which is home of Kabbalah, which is the mystical branch of Judaism, very, very popular these days. It's had a real renaissance. Madonna is an avid student of Kabbalah, not Madonna the Virgin Mary, but Madonna the pop singer. Caesarea Philippi will travel to the Golan Heights and even be able to see the road to Damascus on which Paul had his conversion attempt. Where are all these places? Well, this is a close-up of the map of Israel. You'll see to the left of the map, and I wanted to get it big enough that you could see things and read things easily, but also small enough. I cut off part of the names. You'll see there to the left, right on the coast, Tel Aviv. Well, you can't see the word Tel Aviv, but dash Yafo. And right next to that, there's a little pink airplane, purplish airplane. That's the airport at the Tel Aviv airport. Jaffa or Yafo is the old city. Right next to it is the new city of Tel Aviv. We'll fly into there, spend just a night or two there. It depends on which day you're arriving. And then we travel by bus up into the northern part of the country, around the West Bank, you see right there in the middle of Israel, to the village of Nazareth, which is in the Galilee, that whole northern part of Israel, Haifa, Tiberias, Bet Shean, that's all the Galilee region. You can see the Sea of Galilee in the upper portion there. We'll make Nazareth our base for operation there, and there we'll be staying at the Ramada Olivier, another modern hotel with a Middle Eastern feel to it. We'll have been up there and see lots of sights there. On the way to Jerusalem, which is what this slideshow is all about, we'll see more of the northern part of Israel, the village of Cana, Nazareth itself. We'll go to the Mount of Transfiguration and drive through the Jordan Valley. All this is leaving on Saturday. Now, perhaps you remember this map. Jerusalem is on this map. Jerusalem's just off the map in the lower left-hand corner. You can see Nablus. That's a far suburb of Jerusalem, a West Bank village in the occupied territories. But close enough that you can travel into Jerusalem from Nablus. All these places are fairly close together, at least by American standards. Nazareth itself is a modern village mixed in with green rolling hills. This actually is not too far from Nazareth. It's the village of Cana. Cana is north of Nazareth, about 2.7 miles. It's the site of the first miracle at a wedding in Cana of Galilee. This is also the home of Nathanael, one of the 12 disciples who followed Jesus. Jesus returns to this community later. A healing takes place here. That story happens to be told in the Gospel of John, 4th chapter, beginning at the 46th verse. It's the healing of an official's son. The location of the actual site of Cana, as mentioned in the Bible, is somewhat uncertain. But this site is fixed by the efforts of the Franciscan order. Many of the holy places, the Christian holy places scattered across Jerusalem, scattered across Israel, the land of Israel, are in the custody of the Franciscans. They worked with Jerome, the Bible translator who did the Vulgate, and everyone saw the Franciscans as a kind of neutral party. They didn't take sides in political disputes, so they got to be the custodians of many of the holy places. Now, this happens to be the Church of the Marriage Feast, the Church of the Wedding in Cana of Galilee. Is this the actual place over which a later church was built? Well, perhaps. By the year 1641, this church was beginning to be built, and it was built on a location that was traditional for the Church of the Wedding Feast. In the upper right-hand corner here, you see Jesus at the wedding feast. This is where he told, when they ran out of wine, he told the servants, fill the wine jars with water, and it later miraculously turned into wine. You see the outside of the church there to the left and the inside of the church there to the right. Stonework looks very familiar, like our own St. Francis. Very nearby this location, there is a Greek Orthodox Church of the Wedding Feast. Cana of Galilee, I mentioned, is the site of the wedding. It's a Franciscan institution established by 1641. Excavations at this place point to an earlier place of worship in this very spot. Underneath this church is another church, or at least the ruins of another church, a basilica-style church. Those are large, formal, community buildings. Often basilicas were used as a kind of town hall. We think of town hall as a place where they have offices, but basilica was a large town gathering space. This basilica was important because it even had 3 apses. And the Church of the Annunciation is nearby in Nazareth. The Annunciation is not, now, this isn't the wedding any longer. This is the place where Gabriel showed up to talk to the Virgin Mary. It has 2 levels to it. Here in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the ground floor level, and right in the middle of the church, now those are altars along the back wall, a large main altar along the back wall, 2 side altars, one on either side. But right in front of it, there's a giant hole in the floor that lets you peer down upon the scene that you see in the upper right-hand corner. This is the lower level church. It was built right into the stone. And if you go down into it, you see where those people are gathered on the left. There's even a very small, ancient church built right into the rock. Is that the site of the wedding in Cana of Galilee? The Franciscans certainly thought so. The Roman Catholic Church thinks so. I said wedding in Cana of Galilee. Is this the place where, we're not talking wedding here, we're talking the Annunciation, I'm sorry. Is this the place where the Archangel Gabriel appeared to Mary? This is indeed what many people feel is exactly that place. From there, we'll move on to perhaps the Mount of Transfiguration. Now, that mountain is actually never given a name in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, Book of Judges, chapter 4, beginning at the 4th verse, Deborah, the prophetess, one of the women identified as a prophet, Deborah leads the armies of Israel out into the plains of Jezreel. And part of the battle of Armageddon in the book of Revelation takes place right here, Mount Tabor. Now, as I say, the actual location of the mount for Jesus to go up on top of the mount and be transfigured is never named. It's just the mount. He goes up the mount. But you can look around and see there aren't a whole lot of mountains nearby. So what's on top of Mount Tabor? Well, another Franciscan basilica there to the left with the green roof, right next to a Greek church, the red roofed building, which is not usually open to the public. There have been churches on this site since the 300s. This location has an early identification in Christian history. It's accepted as an accurate location officially by the Syriac and the Byzantine churches. It is possible that the Mount of Transfiguration might be a somewhat close mountain, Mount Hermon, but most people don't seem to think that's the Mount of Transfiguration. I mentioned churches on this site since the 300s. When the Turks defeated the last of the Crusaders in the 1300s, now 1,000 years after churches were built on this location, all the buildings here were destroyed. But, as is the case often in Israel, destroy a building, it will be rebuilt. By the late 19th, early 20th century, rebuilt churches appear on this very location, including the Mount of Transfiguration, or the Church of the Transfiguration. This is the same two church buildings from a different angle, the green-roofed basilica. You see that large, big, central raised roof, very typical of a basilica. The curved portion at the back is what's referred to as the apse. The altars are built inside those apses. And you may recall the whole story of the Transfiguration. I like to preach on it. To me, it's one of those seminal moments in the ministry of Jesus where Jesus finds his mission. This episode is recounted in the Gospel of Matthew, or the Gospel of Mark, and in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus takes three of his closest disciples, Peter, James, and John. Those are the three men at the bottom in this painting. Peter to the left, James there in the middle, and John on the right. John was supposed to have been the youngest of the disciples. That's why he has no beard. Peter becomes the leader of the disciples. They revered wisdom of the elderly. Peter's often given white hair and a white beard to indicate that. And while Jesus was at prayer, Moses, in this painting, Moses there on the left, and Elijah there on the right, appear with Jesus. And Jesus finds himself transfigured. His robes begin to glow white. There was even a kind of aura that lit up the area around them. That's that blue egg-shaped, it's kind of an aura. Mandorla is the technical term for that in art. It's a kind of body halo. Just as we think of halos surrounding the head, in ancient art, halos surrounded the entire body, and they were called mandorlas. After visiting this place and seeing these places, we'll travel to Jerusalem itself, where we'll be staying at the American Colony. I have to tell you, one of the American Colony Hotel, one of the things that makes me very excited about our time in Jerusalem, I have to tell you, is staying at this very hotel. It looks like it would fit right in Central Texas, in the Hill Country. But the American Colony is a very famous hotel. It was established in the 1880s as a colony with a religious mission of early outreach to Muslims and Jews. The folks who run the hotel were not involved in disputes between Christians, Muslims, Jews. Rather, they tried to mediate and treat everyone fairly. There was a sheet from this very hotel that was used as the surrender flag in 1917 when the Ottoman Turks surrendered the city of Jerusalem to the invading British forces. This hotel had frequent stays by General Allenby, one of the figures in the movie Lawrence of Arabia. He's the guy that Lawrence of Arabia goes to report to, if you remember that Peter O'Toole movie. You also may remember that in that movie there is a newspaper man. That's based on a real historical figure, Lowell Thomas, who was a freelance reporter. This hotel is where Lawrence of Arabia met Lowell Thomas. There are other famous people who have stayed at this hotel. The hotel is beautiful by today's standards, but even in its place, it was always conceived with a religious mission, not only for outreach and service, but as a gathering place for pilgrims of all kinds who come to the city of Jerusalem and who need respite while there. The hotel originally had one building, and then they bought the building next door and the building next door, and now they sort of own the whole block. And they've turned the ground in between these buildings, their buildings go around, into an outdoor dining room. And so this is the dining room. This is where you can have breakfast every morning and dinner every evening. You'll notice that it's particularly green and lush. You're shut away from the traffic, the noise of the city. The upper right-hand corner, you can see one of the rooms. This is very typical of the rooms. Can't promise you'll get this very room. But again, the idea is that when we go to Jerusalem, we'll be traveling, we'll be walking, we'll be seeing a lot. And when we come back to the hotel, I want us all to be able to relax, to kick back, to really get a good night's sleep so that the hotel does not distract from the pilgrimage that we are making together. This is a place where you can come back, relax, pray, reflect on the journey that you've made that day. Bottom right-hand corner, you can see the hotel, some of the older portions of the hotel itself with the palm trees. This is a place where you can see the city of Jerusalem. By the way, did I even mention that this hotel is just a hop, skip, and a jump outside the Jewish quarter of the city? This hotel had been at one point purchased by Baron Ustinov, a Russian nobleman. He's the grandfather of Peter Ustinov. It was developed and expanded by him. I mentioned in its role in the surrender of the Turks to the Brits in 1917. In the War of Independence, the Jewish independence, 1947, the hotel functioned as a Red Cross center for aid to folks on all sides in the war. Location, again, proves quite important. In 1967, the Six-Day War, the city is divided. This hotel literally is just a few yards from the Mandelbaum Gate, one of the few and perhaps one of the most important crossing points from east to west. The hotel itself, I mentioned, built in the 1880s by the Spofford family, who survived the Great Fire in Chicago. They wanted to get out. They traveled to Europe. Along the way, they were shipwrecked. Their children died. They felt that they were spared by God for some purpose. So they started a small religious sect of their own, living in primitive communism. They also wrote a hymn, "It is well with my soul." Perhaps you know that one, very popular still today among older, more evangelical groups. Although they started out living in primitive communism, tensions arose within the group. Every religious group has its own dividing lines, people who feel that the group ought to go this way or the group ought to go that way. The group was made of Swedes, Brits, mainly Americans. And in the early 1900s, the religious experiment actually collapsed and it was sold off to other families. But not before they'd made their mark in history. I think you'll enjoy staying in the hotel almost as much as the other things you see in the city itself. This day has just been one day of the journey, but it does bring us to the city of Jerusalem and what we can observe there.